You are listening to the Body Charge podcast, and I'm your host, Sandy Sanderson. Welcome to the Body Charge podcast. Today's topic is the problem with periods. 50% of women who exercise experience menstrual disturbances. Stress has a major impact on fertility and regular periods. It's not only psychological stress or sleep deprivation, but exercise, excessive exercise, can also cause periods to stop. My special guest today is Allison Yamomoto, a mentor and health coach for the active woman. She was an NCAA cheerleader at UC Berkeley before running half and full marathons, including the Boston Marathon, and knows only too well the pitfalls of over-exercise for women. So welcome, Alison. Lovely to have you on board.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. Excited to have this discussion.
My first question for you is, what should active women know when it comes to their menstrual cycle?
Yeah, it's a great question. So for a lot of active women, I think that one of the things that we underestimate is how important it is to have a period in the first place. One of the things that I've seen and from my own personal experience, I experienced was the prevalence of normalizing period irregularities, especially amongst active women. And I feel like there's sort of two different sides of the equation of myths that I typically like to debunk for folks, especially who are active. And one of those is that it's okay or normal to not have a period or a cycle just because you're active or because you're exercising a lot. And especially if you have a healthy eating patterns and you tend to be really regimented in your health, then experiences, and this is something that I experienced firsthand, was going to the doctor and being told that, oh, well, because you exercise, it's actually quite normal for you to not have a period. And that's not the case. And there are health risks that are associated with not having a regular period as an active woman that are important to know about and important to address, even if you aren't actively trying to be fertile for reasons of pregnancy or reproductive reasons, because of the other health risks that can pose. And I think on the other side of the equation is that there's a lot of information about how being active and exercising at all can be like kind of putting your period at risk. And so that therefore there's kind of the other end of the spectrum of like believing that being active at all is going to risk your period and that you would therefore not be able to exercise at all in order to have a regular cycle. And of course, that other end of the spectrum also isn't true. And so I
we
think
need
that
a balance.
Exactly. It's the balance. And I think that we can actually use our periods as a really helpful feedback loop to know whether or not we're maintaining a healthy level of that balance that we're talking about when it comes to our nutrition, when it comes to our exercise, and decreasing some of the other health risks that could be major issues if we aren't supporting appropriate levels of energy availability that are optimal for minimizing those health risks.
So it begs the question of, why does nature switch off periods when with athletes, or it can happen with ballet dancers or people who really exercise a lot, even as in their profession every day, several hours a day, they lose a lot of fat. And I believe that there's a link between how much fat you have in your body and your period regularity. So it's nature switching it off so we don't have a period, because not enough fat really to get pregnant is there. You need to be able to feed that baby, but you can't have too much fat. So there's the balance, because then that's bad for your cardiovascular system, your heart, and all the rest of it. let alone your ego, because let's face it, women don't like to be, overweight. Apart from how bad it makes you feel and how lacking in energy, we also like to look nice, to, feel good about ourselves and how we appear to others and ourselves, really. And so periods you mentioned were a gauge as to your health. So what should women know about what's normal in a period?
Yeah. And I think that the point that you brought up is really important, which is that this is something that we see really frequently in sports or any sort of athletic field where there are really high pressure for certain body standards. And when it comes to things like low body fat percentages, there have been cultures that have existed, especially in women's sport, where there are criteria that you have to meet for certain body fat percentages or certain body standards. And that can increase the risk that somebody's going to experience this issue or increase the prevalence of this type of issue occurring in that sport. And unfortunately, and I think that this is something that hopefully we're continuing to see the trends that we're starting to see in some of these fields already, which is normalizing more inclusivity in terms of body compositions and body types that are represented in those types of sports. And I think that even in some of we recently just had the Olympics, and I think that being able to see a broader representation of different types of body types being highlighted and represented as athletic body types or as athletic woman is a trend that would be amazing to be able to continue to normalize versus the really reinforced narrative that there's a certain standard or that the smallest version of yourself has to be the fittest version, which is what can cause people to fall into these
Yeah,
standards.
it's a cookie cutter approach, isn't it?
Exactly.
And
And to your point, I think that there definitely is the issue of, really low body fat percentage is one of the leading indicators. Another one is energy availability. So even for folks that aren't necessarily at a super low body fat percentage, they can struggle with this issue if they aren't appropriately managing their energy availability. And then the other one that you mentioned, which is also a really important one, is overtraining. And so if folks are overtraining, and this doesn't necessarily have to be at like an elite level, even it could be that,
going to the gym too
somebody who's
much.
exactly. So like the high intensity exercise every single day
Mm.
could be causing overtraining. It could be burning you out. So it's sort of those like interesting few components. The other one is, even the psychological stress component, which usually, in the majority of the cases that I see, that's not the biggest component, but it is interesting because I think that there's, the people that tend to have this type of issue tend to be the perfectionists, the high achievers, where they also tend to have higher levels of stress because of how they're navigating high standards that they're setting for themselves, really ambitious goals. And then maybe if they're also using the gym or exercise as a way to manage through some of that stress, you can see how that can be a really reinforcing cycle
Yeah,
where they're getting
so
stuck in these chronic levels of stress. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
yeah, it's the nervous energy, isn't it? So when you go and have a workout, you can dissipate that nervous energy and expend it, and then you feel relaxed and relieved and, exhausted. Um, so that there may be other issues involved with that as well. So, it's to do with metabolism, the whole nervous system. And you can get on a treadmill that you can't get off of. It's like
Mhm.
habit forming, almost like a drug, isn't it? That drug of exercise can can catch you. And then you've lost your balance. And things start to go pear-shaped. I know some very active women who've been personal trainers and coaches, and they've developed osteopenia,
Mhm.
bone problems from that over exercise. They just drain all their resources because, when you exercise a lot or under any kind of stress, you pee out a lot more magnesium. So you upset your whole mineral balance in the body, which is essential for your metabolism.
Mm.
And the nervous system and the immune system to function, they all need that energy. And then if you spend those good minerals and don't replace them and have that rest and recovery, which a lot of people don't give themselves, then they can't recover properly. They keep scraping the bottom of the barrel until they have a very serious health issue. Um,
Mm.
so, so I think the message is always to come back to, what is my balance, and not everyone's the same. People are genetically different. They have different life experiences. Some people have an injuries, it's all over the place. And I think the message is to learn what's normal for you. It's always in the context of the general population, isn't it? But then we can always find things that make us different.
Mm.
Yeah. So
Yeah. And I,
yeah, go ahead.
oh yeah, I was just gonna say I love that you brought up the osteopenia because one of the health risks that I was mentioning to having a missing cycle, especially for folks that are active, is actually bone weakness, and it can impact your bone health. It can also impact your muscle health, which is of course related to if you're also in a state where you're chronically overtraining and your muscles aren't appropriately able to recover and repair from those sessions, then it is really increasing your risk of injury. But also because your cycle is missing and your energy availability might be really low, then what can happen is the low state of estrogen that you're experiencing hormonally can actually impact your bone health and essentially cause there to be a early onset bone degradation that can occur. So that one of the issues that is very common in folks that are in this state, so they're experiencing a missing cycle for a prolonged period of time, are at risk of osteopenia or even early onset osteoporosis. And it's essentially like an exact, you're mentioning, why does your body do this? And an interesting thing that is happening in these situations. So if somebody has hypothalamic amenorrhea, or if they have what we're talking about here, which is an energy deficiency, then the interesting thing is that the fact that your cycle is missing is, in a weird way, it's your body's natural response to the situation that it's in, because it's sort of interpreting the state to be in almost like a survival state, and it's shutting down mechanisms that it views as secondary in order to ensure that energy is being directed to what is really core functionality. And so because of that, there are these health risks that we're seeing that are not just related to fertility. And it's sometimes not immediately connected, that a lot of the folks that are experiencing this are also experiencing other issues that they might not even view as connected. And it could be impacting digestion, it could be impacting bone health, injuries, sicknesses. And yet, what it might be presenting as is the missing period, but not always tying it together with all these other factors that could be occurring.
And also I think toxicity is an element as well, because I always thought in my lifetime that nature gave us the period every month to get rid of stuff that shouldn't be there anymore. And so if you're not having a period to get rid of stuff, to get rid of waste products, then what's happening with those waste products that they're building up inside in the uterus? Could it lead to, other kind of toxicities in the body? Just like if you
Mm,
don't have a bowel movement when you should, and
mm,
that causes problems with the
mm.
gut.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
I had a friend many years ago, and she wasn't a big exerciser, but she didn't want to have her period because it interfered with her lifestyle. So she kept taking the estrogen pill without a break. And she eventually got very sick with all sorts
mm,
of other, like a premature aging kind of thing. She developed all sorts of immunocompromised ailments um, because the body, I think, was so toxic. It didn't have a chance to eliminate. When we look at who we are as normal human beings, normal women, we have a cycle when we're in balance for a good reason. And, as soon as you start to interfere with that natural cycle, things go wrong. So it's always coming back to the center, isn't it? Working out, well, what's normal for me? And should I be doing that? I mean, is it really healthy, like I think, or could it be doing some damage?
mhm,
My next question is, on your page, you mentioned REDS and
mhm.
hypothalamic amenorrhea. Can you explain a little bit more about that?
Yeah. Wow. Your pronunciation was incredible. Normally it's
Oh, thank you.
somewhat of it's a mouthful,
Yeah, yeah.
but yeah. So RED-S stands for relative energy deficiency in sport. And it's interesting because it's an evolution of this concept called female athlete triad, which was just sort of gaining prevalence. So folks might have heard of that term before, but they're referring to the same condition, which is essentially that if you're in a situation where you're in energy deficiency, which essentially just means that your body doesn't have enough energy to be able to support all of the energy needs that it has, including your activities and your just basic bodily functions. Then what'll happen is it's redirecting that energy from your like core bodily functions, or from the secondary functions like reproduction or even like immunofunctioning, into like the core functioning. But it's all just essentially this term that says if you're overtraining and or you're underfueling, meaning that you're not giving your body enough food and nutrition in a way
Recovery.
that's, yeah, throughout the day. So energy availability isn't just like this math equation. It's also like, how are you feeling around your workouts? How are you feeling throughout the course of the day? What is the composition of what you're fueling? Then it essentially can lead to a lot of health risks. And that's everything that we're talking about in terms of the bone issues, the muscular risks. And that could be everything from the muscles that you're using in activity all the way down to the muscles that you're using for digestion. And so that's why you could be having some issues around these digestive symptoms, even in some of these more chronic states where you're having relative energy deficiency. And it's related to hypothalamic amenorrhea because that's essentially just the clinical term that's saying that because of this situation that your body is in, it is now shutting down your period. And so amenorrhea just means that you're missing the period. And the hypothalamic amenorrhea is saying that the missing period is caused by these lifestyle factors. And so essentially hypothalamic amenorrhea is one like very leading indicator that you could be experiencing red S, which is that energy deficiency. But those are essentially like clinical terms that are capturing that there are a lot of health risks that are being posed by the fact that you're having a missing period. However, you technically could be experiencing reds or red S and not be experiencing a missing period. There could be other symptoms like, low energy. You could be experiencing low libido, cold all the time, hair weaknesses, a lot of fixation around food or like constantly thinking about food, really frequent urination. It can happen in men as well. So I know we're talking about the context of periods, but the condition itself is much more broadly encapsulating of this general state where you're not appropriately maintaining energy availability, which could be leading to some of these other health risks.
Sounds like a chronic exhaustion, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, I love that you put it like that because it really is this state where your body is under stress. It's under a lot of stress because the energy availability is low, and a lot of the times it can actually lead to really heightened levels of stress and anxiety. And because perfectionism can be like a predisposition for having these types of issues or feeling like you're really, really disciplined and really regimented in the routines that you have set out, it is an interesting situation where you're already predisposed to that stress. And then because you could be also in this state of what you're leading to is kind of like this chronic burnout,
The downward
it's
cycle.
only exactly, it's very cyclical. And so I can, and in many ways, it's kind of reinforcing to your point. You can get on that treadmill with how you're feeling a little bit more trapped around your routine with food, your routine with exercise. And then sometimes if you feel like you're experiencing some of these issues and you're used to trying to fix them through kind of this willpower of controlling, if you can just make more optimizations with your food or try to cut things out to try to experiment
It gets
with
extreme. It just keep
exactly.
pushing through it. So it's a bit like exercising and doing another set of repetitions, and you mentally push through it. But maybe it's not appropriate to do that extra. Maybe your
Mhm.
body's giving you messages that you're ignoring to get back to the balance.
Yeah, I love that you point that out because I feel like a lot of the messages that we see in fitness culture or in fitness in general or in sports is a praise for pushing through. Just power through. If you can endure it, do it. And that's what discipline is necessitates essentially. And it's really interesting because some of these signs and symptoms can be a little bit more subtle. And a lot of the folks that are experiencing this, and I can speak firsthand for myself, which is that it was really easy to ignore because I always thought in my brain, well, I could push through this. I can endure this. It's not so bad that I can't muscle kind of just determined force myself through some of these workouts that feel exhausting, or through some of these signs or symptoms that feel like I could put up with them. And I underestimated that these were actually warning signs I should have been paying attention to, and that it wasn't just about the near term of whether or not I could experientially push through these right now, so much as that they were indicating that other health issues could arise because I was maintaining and continuing to push through and exacerbating the condition that I was
Yeah. So
experiencing.
how did you get off your own personal treadmill when your periods weren't working the way they should? How did you reevaluate what you were doing? What was your trigger?
Yeah. For me, the biggest one was my period. And I'm really lucky. And I think women in general are lucky in the sense that we get that feedback loop. Men can be experiencing this condition and not know it because they don't menstruate. And so for me, I thought I knew something was off because I wasn't getting my period, but I ignored it for a really, really long time, even though that was the trigger that something was off. What ultimately inspired me to take bigger action around it and no longer procrastinate the issue was really getting educated about the other health risks and realizing that, oh, I was actually increasing my risk of not only stress fractures and injuries. And I think that as somebody who's a runner, especially, stress fractures is just one of your biggest fears because it can take you out for such a long
Mm.
time. And here I was like so regimented in my routine that the idea of an injury taking me out for like weeks or months was really terrifying, but also the notion of the longer term health implications and starting to realize that the same things that I was doing with such discipline in order to invest in my health, realizing that those were the exact same things that were now causing and posing health risks was a huge light bulb moment for me, and having to rewrite that narrative that I had been holding on to so tightly, and also getting to the point where I was really burnt out with my routine. I was just chronically really stressed. I felt like even the standards I was holding myself for myself when it came to exercise and when it came to nutrition were becoming prohibitive to the point where I just yearned for a sense of more freedom and permission in my life. And that was really the breaking point for me in realizing that something had to change.
Yeah, I think women are particularly sensitive to stress and it affects many systems. Because I remember when I had one of my children at the time, my husband's business wasn't doing well, and we had a lot of financial stress, and my milk supply just dried up. Just I passed 3 months, I
Mm.
couldn't do it. And my other children, I was like a cow, I could have fed more than one. So it's not something that's innate in my body. My body was reacting to the stress.
Mhm.
And so it can affect many connected elements in that hypothalamic pituitary system and the
Mhm.
digestive system, because when you're tense, you feel tense, and your stomach muscles tighten and you feel like you some people go and eat something sweet to try and alleviate that stress, but that's not the way to go, because let me tell you, you will use up so many more magnesium molecules to just digest that carbohydrate. We have a business called Elektra Magnesium, where we developed a whole range of products you can absorb transdermally. So particularly if you have any kind of digestive issues, you're not getting all the nutrients from the food that you eat, even if it is fresh, healthy, organic food. You can absorb a lot more through the skin. And this helps get off that treadmill, off that vicious circle, where you've been trapped by that stress. If you can alleviate the stress, you can get to the next square and the next square and the next square, and it becomes easier to reestablish a better lifestyle. So stress is a really big one, and it's very entrapping for people. And sometimes they don't even realize how stressed they are. It's not in their consciousness until they actually relax or learn to relax and feel the difference between constant anxiety and stress and, oh, this is different. Yeah, I'm really feeling relaxed now. It's funny. It makes me laugh sometimes. But, that's our journey, and that's our journey. We're here to try and wake people up to who they are, how their body works, get in tune, you know, find out what's normal for you. And as we're nearing the end of our session here, our interview, I'd love you to let people know how they can connect with you or find out more about what you do.
Yeah, of course. So I'm on Instagram at Allison Yamamoto, my name. And I also have a website where if you're interested in working together or if any of this story resonated with you, then I would love to connect. And we have some free resources there as well if you're interested in starting your journey and learning a little bit more. And that would be at theallymethod.com.
Yeah, sometimes women can be embarrassed about talking about these issues. And if they can read something someone else has written or listen or watch a video, they can learn in a private manner, in front of their computer. There's no one there. It's a little bit more anonymous, and they can digest a lot of material that way. And thank you so much for doing that for women. It's really awesome that you do this, because we do suffer a lot from stresses, and the world stress levels are increasing in every country. And we just need better defenses, and we need to recognize the signals of stress in our body and then be able to have remedies to fix it, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it's definitely something that I love what you said about we don't really know often how much stress we're enduring. And you can get in a cycle where the baseline level of stress that you're experiencing just existing is like higher than zero, essentially. And so then it becomes, to your point, this wheel where any additional stressors feel even more exacerbated because you're starting from a place of already being at this elevated baseline stress level. And I can speak from firsthand experience that that is definitely something that is it's a hard cycle to break, but it's definitely possible.
It's achievable. It certainly is. You just have to know how, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, thank you so much, and you have a great day.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sandy. You too.
Bye-bye. I hope you liked this conversation and will share it with others. Let me know what you thought about it in the comments below. If you want to listen to other Body Charge conversations, click like, subscribe, the bell icon, and click all notifications. Subscribe to our newsletter to get updates on blogs, podcasts, videos, and magnesium special offers at electromagnesium.com.au. Relax, recharge, and recover.